and you're watching Arirang News. The global trade war has taken another step up. On Thursday, the European Union announced that it's imposing provisional safeguard measures on imports of steel products. EU officials said they had no choice but to take such action in light of US steel tariffs that came into force earlier this year. But it looks like that won't be the end. The US Department of Commerce is holding a hearing on whether to impose a 25% tariff on imported cars as well. Both measures could have significant consequences for South Korea, which is already facing economic problems of its own, with its growth forecast being cut in recent weeks. We'll delve deeper into these issues with an expert later in the show, but first we go over to our news centre to catch up on the latest headlines with Kim Mo-kyun. Over to you, Mo-kyun.
Hi, Jang-ho. South Korea's presidential Blue House has unveiled additional documents drafted by a military intelligence unit that showed plans to deploy troops if protests grew violent following a constitutional court ruling in March 2017 that would determine the fate of then-President Park Geun-hye. New documents submitted by Seoul's defense ministry show the Defense Security Command's proposal to declare martial law may have been more deliberate than initially believed. The detailed plans for the army to deploy tanks and armored vehicles into downtown Seoul to prevent potential mass rallies and impose total control over the media, social network services, the National Intelligence Service, and the National Assembly. It also suggests the chief of the army take control of a martial law command instead of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under conventional military plans. A special investigation team has been probing the case upon direct orders from President Moon. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo brought up 3 items for discussion during his most recent trip to Pyongyang, but is yet to receive any response from the North. According to Representative No Hye-chan, floor leader of the minor opposition Justice Party, those items are a full declaration of its nuclear arsenal, a denuclearization timeline, and an unfulfilled promise made by Kim at the Singapore summit. That promise is likely to refer to destroying a missile engine testing site. No said he was informed of this by acting U.S. Undersecretary for Political Affairs Stephen Mull during his recent visit to Washington. He says that North Korea is demanding security assurances before making any concrete steps. The U.S. last week made a request to the UN Security Council to halt all shipments of oil to North Korea, saying the regime has been violating sanctions. China and Russia, however, are saying that they won't let that happen unless there's enough evidence that sanctions had been breached. Our Park Geun-hye has the details.
China and Russia have turned down the United States' request to halt all shipments of refined oil products to North Korea. The U.S., who made clear that it will maintain maximum pressure on Pyongyang until it completely denuclearizes, made the request to the UN Security Council's North Korea Sanctions Committee last week, based on accusations that the North had breached sanctions. It claims that as of May 30th, there had been 89 illegal ship-to-ship transfers of refined petroleum products by the regime this year. The U.S. also asked for the committee to notify all UN member nations that North Korea used illegal imports to allow it to exceed the 500,000 barrels a year of oil imports permitted by the resolution adopted by the Council in December last year. A report submitted by the U.S. says that North Korean tankers are assumed to have delivered almost 1.4 million barrels, which is nearly triple the quota. China and Russia's support is needed for any oil cutoff to be enforced, as the 2 countries provide large amounts of energy and oil to the north. But they said they need more time and proof before approving the U.S. request. Russia's UN mission said it's collecting information on every single case of illegal transfer of petroleum. And the Chinese mission asked the U.S. to provide the facts that are needed to make the decision. As Beijing and Moscow have put a hold on the U.S. complaint, there will be a 6-month delay before any action can be taken. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News.
More prison time for the disgraced former president Park Geun-hye. The Seoul Central District Court sentenced the former leader Park to 8 years in prison for taking off-book funds from the country's intelligence agency and interfering in the 2016 general elections during her administration. The court also fined Park $2.9 million on charges of taking state agency funds. With that, the former leader is now facing a total of 32 years behind bars, as she had already received a 24-year sentence for her role in the influence peddling scandal. In another trial on Friday morning, prosecutors requested for Park's 24-year sentence to be lengthened to 30 years and her fine be increased to $104 million. The appeals court will rule on that request next month. The U.S. Commerce Department is holding a hearing on the Trump administration's proposal for tariffs on auto imports. The proposal has triggered a massive backlash from auto group representatives and foreign governments, including South Korea. Kim Hye-sung reports.
The U.S. Commerce Department held a public hearing on Section 232 on Thursday as it investigates whether car imports negatively impact U.S. national security. Auto industry representatives and more than 40 delegates from foreign governments presented their case against the Trump administration's proposal of a 25% tariff on auto imports. U.S. car makers said the tariffs would cause the price of a car imported into the U.S. to jump by an average of almost $6,000 and U.S.-made ones by about $2,000. They also warned tariffs would lead to less investment in the U.S., job losses, and would hurt the overall U.S. economy. The Peterson Institute for International Economics has warned that tariffs, even without retaliation, could lead to the loss of 195,000 American jobs. The U.S. imported more than $200 billion in foreign cars and trucks last year, and major exporters to the U.S., including South Korea, the EU, Canada, and Japan, have voiced their opposition. South Korea's Deputy Trade Minister Kang Sung-cheon said Korea's auto exports in no way threaten U.S. national security, and the Trump administration's concerns about the U.S. auto industry have already been addressed in the recent amendment to the South Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. The European Union warned it will retaliate if the U.S. goes ahead with auto duties, emphasizing its opposition to the administration's continued protectionist moves. In Thursday's hearing, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said it's too early to say if the administration would decide to impose the new levies. The Commerce Department started its investigation into auto imports in May. It's expected to review the roughly 2,300 comments submitted during Thursday's hearing and announce its final decision by next month. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
The heat wave gripping Korea is not backing down, with the mercury forecast to hit close to 40 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country today. This scorching heat is especially dangerous to the elderly and children. Experts are informing people of how to stay safe as the number of patients with heat-related illnesses surges. Our Lee Seung-jae with the details.
To say the weather has been hot in Korea this summer is an understatement, with day after day of blistering temperatures nationwide. The southeastern city of Daegu, notorious for its summer heat, is forecast to swelter under a high of 38 degrees Celsius on Friday. Seoul won't be that much cooler at 34 degrees. Temperatures are expected to remain in the 30s for the weekend, with heat wave warnings remaining in place. The heat wave has also led to a rise in the number of casualties, with over 700 people admitted to hospital due to heat-related health conditions. Of that total, more than 200 people were hospitalized during the past week alone. The number is higher than last year and the year before that. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs says as many as 790,000 livestock in Korea have died as of Tuesday due to the heat. The number is nearly 30% more than during the same period last year, when 600,000 animals died. So how can we prevent ourselves from falling foul of the dangerous heat? An expert says is as simple as remembering 3 things.
Many people are concerned about the heat wave: water, shade and rest. Just follow these 3 things and you can prevent the worst from happening.
With the August heat still ahead of us, experts advise against children and the elderly spending too much time outside, as they are the most vulnerable to the extreme heat. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
I'm Kim Mo-kyun, and those are your news headlines at this hour.
The EU is jumping into the mix of a global trade war, and that's set to be bad news for South Korea's steel industry. Their action is triggered by America's protectionist measures that could also hurt Seoul steelmakers. Kim Hye-sung explains further.
Korea's steel industry is caught in the middle of an ongoing global trade war. The European Union's announcement to impose provisional safeguard measures on imported steel products Thursday could particularly have an impact on Korea. Korea is the number 4 steel exporter to the EU as well as the third largest steel exporter to the United States. But its steel exports already face quota limits from the U.S. As part of an agreement to the amendment of the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement, Korea still has received a quota of about 2.68 million tons of steel exports, or 70% of the annual average Korean steel exports to the United States between 2015 and 2017. Other steel exporters to the U.S. like the EU, Mexico, and Canada are facing 25% tariffs, which went into effect in June. The EU's retaliatory tariffs, which aims to prevent a sudden increase of steel imports diverted from the U.S., is expected to further squeeze Korean steel producers.
Korean steel exports to Europe are mainly steel sheets and steel plates, which are produced by big steel makers, whereas export items to the US are mainly steel pipes that are produced by small and mid-sized companies. So the EU's safeguard measure could be a double squeeze on Korean steel exporters.
Korea's trade ministry held a meeting with local steel makers Thursday morning to draw up measures aimed at minimizing possible negative effects on steel exports. The government also said it will help local manufacturers secure as much quota as possible. The EU investigation into a number of steel imports is set to last until the end of this year before it makes its final decision on safeguard measures. 최시영, Arirang News.
Now to discuss these measures and other issues on the economy, we have with us Professor Shin Sang-young from Kyung University. Thank you for coming in today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So the EU has now come out with its own steel tariffs to impose on the international community. It is perhaps what everyone expected when the US triggered this trade tariff war, whatever you want to call it, with its own steel tariffs earlier this year. What is your reaction to these latest developments?
Well, the European Commission imposed the provisional safeguard measures on the imports of the 23 targeted steel products from the foreign countries. And then this provisional safeguard measures can remain in place for maximum 200 days. And then actually it takes the form of the tariff rate quota. That means according to the European Commission, they will impose 25% tariffs on the export volume more than the average export volume for the last 3 years. So they said that it cannot be, give a huge negative impact on steel producers, foreign steel producers who have exported their products to the European Union. Well, this is the fact, content decision made by the European Commission. But we have to think about why they decide to impose the safeguard measures. Well, that is certainly the American government protectionist trade policy. Well, in fact, the USA government, under the Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act 1962, they decide to impose 25% tariff rates on steel products imported from foreign countries. And then after the USA's decision, there was a so-called trade diversion effects. Trade diversion effects means that the steel producers who exported their products to the USA market, after the USA's government new protectionist trade policy, they changed their destination of exports from USA to the European Union. Subsequently, their exports to the European Union increased dramatically. So according to the European Commission, they decide to protect the domestic steel producers. This is the reason why they impose the safeguard measures on the imports of steel products from foreign countries. But I think that for a time being, those kind of trends will continue, even though we do not expect it, because that the USA does not seem to change their protectionist trade policy. That means there will be the retaliatory measures from the European Union. So there must be some escalation effects between two countries. We already discussed about the trade war between USA and China. So we can say that considering the trade war among three big major economies in the world, I mean USA, China, and European Union, we cannot avoid the very protectionistic trade environments, global trade environments, I think, which will be very negative factors for the Korean economy. Because as we know very well, Korean economy is a small open economy, which is heavily reliant on the foreign trade. If the international, I mean global trading circumstances became more protectionistic one, certainly it can be very negative environments for the Korean economy.
Certainly, we might be already seeing that with the steel tariffs that the EU has proposed. South Korea produces a lot of steel. It's one of the significant producers of steel in the world. And South Korean producers must be concerned with this latest announcement.
Definitely.
What kind of impact do you think it could have?
Well, South Korean steel producers are one of the major producers in the world. I mean, according to the explanation given by the reporter just before, Korea has been the #3 steel exporter to the USA market and #4 to the European Union market. Definitely, we have been one of the major steel producers in the world. But after the USA's very protectionist trade policy taken roughly the end of March, the Korean steel producers have sought for alternative markets. So subsequently, Korean exports to the European Union increased faster than expectation. Well, they can be the reason why the European Union they took the safeguard measures against the foreign steel producers. Well, but anyway, so there is trade diversion effects, and the South Korean government just tried to minimize the negative effects caused by the Americans' government very protectionist trade policy. But if the European Union also impose the safeguard measures, provisional safeguard measures on the steel products exported by the Korea, definitely Korean steel producers will face more challenges in their trade with other countries. If I give you a figure, South Korean annual exports of the 23 targeted products, which was designated by the European Union, actually it reached 3.3 million tons, and it was worth of $2.9 billion, the exports. But after the European Union, I mean, right now government prepared, I mean, convened a meeting with the Korean steelmakers to estimate the potential negative impacts on the Korean steel industry. So we have to wait and see, but we can easily guess that there must be very heavy negative impact on the Korean steel producers, because we cannot export to the USA market, we cannot export to the European market. Then unless finding the alternative market, the Korean steel producers will face more difficulties in exporting their products.
And it's not just steel. The US has also held a hearing today about imposing tariffs on imported cars as well. I mean, potentially that could be even bigger impact than steel is for South Korea.
I think so, because the Korean automakers are certainly one of the major automakers in the world. Hyundai, Kia, and then Samsung, and then GM, and Sangyong. And then, as you know well, out of total number of the cars produced by this major Korean automakers, roughly 20 or 25% cars are assembled in foreign production lines in the United States or in China, in other countries. So if the USA government imposed very heavy tariffs on imported cars, definitely directly Korean automakers will be affected. And then of course, then secondly, we are right now try to finding the alternative market which can replace the USA market. But as you know very well, USA market is the largest auto market in the world. So it could be very difficult for Korean automakers, practically speaking, to find the alternative market. And then another market, potential market for us is China. But China is not free from the negative impact caused by the very protectionist trade policy of the USA government.
On the flip side, EU has just signed its largest ever, supposedly, free trade agreement with Japan.
Right.
It's also started a free trade agreement with Australia and New Zealand. And then also in Asia, the 16 countries of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, as they're known, have also started negotiating again of how to go move ahead with their agreement. This seems to run counter to what's going on in the US and EU and US and China. What do you make of this trend?
Right. I think the regional integration has been one of the global trends over the last 1 or 2 decades. Well, I think we have to find the reason, causes for this one, from the WTO, the limits of WTO system. WTO system was launched in 1994, and the first round, named the Doha round, started, but it does not, did not work properly. It has not been worked very properly over the last two decades. So on the part of member countries of WTO, they should find an alternative way to get the economic benefits from the international trade. So the alternative way which they found out was the way through the regional economic integrations. There are 5 stages of economic integrations, regional economic integrations: FTA, customs union, common market, full economic union, and full economic and political integration. These are the 5 stages of regional economic integrations. And by having a membership of the various forms and various stages of economic integrations, member countries could gain some economic benefits from trade. So it has been a global trend. Of course, the economic fundamentals of the WTO is different from the fundamentals of regional economic integrations, because WTO is based on multilateralism and regional economic integration is based on bilateralism or regionalism. But to maintain WTO system, WTO leading member countries recognize allow the member countries to participate in the regional economic integrations to maintain the WTO system, as I already explained. So it has been a global trend. But the second one, this time, the very protectionistic trade policy of the United States, it can be another factor which pushed the member countries to have more strong motivations of the membership of the regional economic integrations. That's the reason why European Union member countries, Japan, and Korea, many countries have thought for the chances, opportunities to participate in various regional economic integrations.
Now let's move on to South Korea quickly. So in South Korea, of course, all these kind of trade wars going on, which is going to affect the South Korean economy. But then the South Korean economy right now is struggling as well. It's very sluggish. The South Korean government has cut down its outlook forecast for the next year, for this year, sorry, from 3% to 2.9%. Yes. How significant is that?
Well, the 2 serious problems which Korean economy has at the moment is the reduction of the investment on the plants and equipments. As of the end of 2017, actually forecasted the increased rate of the investment on plants and equipment was about 3.3%, but actually the increased rate of the investment on equipment and plants and equipment was only 1.5%. And another one is the shrink of the private consumption. Well, also the private consumption increasing rate was, estimated one as the end of the 2017 was 2.8%, but the real figure was the 2.7%. So we're considering these 2 things, we can find it out how serious Korean economy is. Because, as I already explained, the Korean economy is open, the small and open economy, and then Korean economic structure is very heavily reliant on the external trade. But over the last 15 years, since 2003, the global economic growth rate was higher than the Korean economic growth rate. What does it mean? The external circumstances for Korean economy was quite favorable, but because of domestic reasons, Korean economy failed to achieve the higher economic growth rate. So the reason in the domestic economic structure is, Korean domestic structure is the shrink of the investment on plant and equipments, and then they slow down the private consumption. So these are the two macroeconomic indexes which are showing how serious Korean economy is at the moment. And on the top of this one, another macroeconomic index showing the seriousness of the Korean economy at the moment is the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is very high. Relatively higher than the before, and then huge household debt, and then those kind of things. Macroeconomic indexes show the quite seriousness of the Korean economy. So, if you ask me what are the measures South Korean government should take, that is that Korean government, I think they should take more initiative roles in the develop and implementing the industrial policy which can promote so-called strategic industries, as they did in 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Over the last 15 years, Korean economic policy was based on neoliberalism. That means the government refrained themselves from participating in the market. But right now, what was the record, the outcomes of those kind of policy over the last 15 years? Korean economy is right now in a bad shape. So Korean government should have to develop and implement more efficient industrial policy which can promote special, safer strategic the industries. And then to achieve the very good outcomes in this policy, the cooperation with big business conglomerates seems to be very important. And then another one is that, the government right now emphasizes social welfare policies. But, the government is missing how to get the money, which will be very important for the efficient and aggressive social welfare policy. So what I'm saying is that by implementing efficient industrial policy, government should make more money. And then with that money, the government should implement the very efficient and aggressive social welfare policy. Plus, to do that, they should cooperate with the Korean, big business conglomerate.
Professor Shin, we're out of time, but thank you for coming in today and sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure.
That's all for now. I'll be back next week with more insights and analysis of the day's top stories. In the meantime, do stay tuned to Arirang for our news updates throughout the days. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
I'm currently living a time as an actress. The time of patience and perseverance to perform the best. I can remain cheerful despite of my tiring schedule thanks to my good old friends. It is because of my time with them